EPA Science Advisory Board is meeting to conduct a quality review of the draft SAB review of the assessment of the potential impacts of hydraulic fracturing for oil and gas on drinking water resources. This public teleconference is being held to hear public comments on the Hydraulic Fracturing Advisory Panel's draft review of that assessment.
Kim Feil?
I'm here. Do you have me?
I can hear you very well. Okay, so please go ahead, Ms. Feil.
Okay, my name is Kimberly from Arlinton, Texas. I live near the ATT Cowboy Stadium. I blog on barnettshellhell.wordpress.com and post my email communications to public officials so that I have evidence that they were forewarned of the risk we have undertaken in this huge and fast build-out of the high-impact industrial mining in urban Arlinton, where we have an average of 3.5 gas wells per square mile. In the agenda with my city council, because I spoke 4 times last night, for trenchless digging to replace water piping, I asked council to test the soil to see if benzene was leaching from the unregulated HDPE piping produced water from the Fort Worth pad sites that are piping produced water to the Brentwood injection well as the litmus test for allowing trenchless digging that is not benzene resistant. Arlington has about 60 pad sites, and in addition has known EPA brownfield sites granted the right to not be remediated under the TCEQ MSD program. I spoke on the risk of selling water and wastewater bonds last night when our drinking water source, Lake Arlington, which has already had a Quicksilver 2010 workover spill that ran from a storage tank overnight into our lake. I mentioned how our lake is at repeated flooding risk and how we have to take care of our water products, how we have many pad sites on the Fort Worth side of the lake as well as over 100 casing laterals underneath it. I reminded council that our rain-charged Lake Arlington could be a commodity if more groundwater sources start showing contamination, as WFAA local news reporter Brett Shipp has recently reported twice on Chisholm Springs, Texas, north of Fort Worth, having at least 200 homes affected with contaminated water, high in chlorine, metals, and minerals in that heavily drilled area. In the WFAA comment, people south of the Metroplex came forward with water contamination reports in Waxahachie and Mansfield, as well as reports from Henderson County, and there was a birth defect complaint there in Tarrant County. There was a complaint of salty water in Boyd, Texas as well. Let me scroll down here. I blogged about how the EPA allows state regulators to decide what effluents to test for before releasing or selling recycled product-produced wastewater west of the 98th meridian. I'm shocked that radionuclides is not on the list. I also see the risk of recycling wastewater become more popular to mitigate the ever-growing risk in injection well-induced frac quakes. Businesses are popping up to recycle produced water into useful products such as firefighting, road spraying for dust or ice, agriculture, or for drought watering, like in mud farming, again, which they don't test for radionuclides there either. Currently, in Texas, injection wells is still the preference for fracking-related waste disposal, and yet the lower-level regulation of the class of injection wells are, in my opinion, inappropriately designated with the least amount of TxDOT oversight in trucking. If we only can redesignate produced water hauling as T norm, then the truck drivers have to account for the volumes that they leave the frac sites with, and those quantities must match up as they arrive at the injection well sites. Flooding in the Texas drill sites have been the rave of social media lately, and the El Paso Times, I believe, has been posting pictures of flooded drill sites when the state's pulling those pictures. We can see the hydrocarbons visibly spilling off into the floodwaters. This should be on the Saab's main radar as climate change serves to worsen the boom and bust of rain cycles. Last I spoke for the Saab, I ran out of time to report on a Colleyville, Texas home who had well water degradation after nearby drilling. I encourage the Saab to contact the city of Colleyville, who sanctioned numerous pre- and post nearby water well testing during this frac. Alarmingly, 2 water wells stopped working after the drilling and could not participate in the post-test results, and yet they were not included in the summary statistics. Overall, I found out that the general change in the Colleyville water wells that were tested support UTA Clear's reporting that the closer the drilling to a groundwater well, the more change is seen. In closing, I encourage the Saab to seek out the mainstream media water contamination stories and to read the comments. People get on there and they're truthful. You will find more relevant testimonies. Recently, I saw one in the Eagle Mountain, Azle area where a commenter said his water well went bad after fracking came in. I recently endured suing Chesapeake Energy in small claims court representing myself. It took a year of my life. Their odors came into my home when my doors and windows were closed, and I'm over 1,400 feet away during well completion. So my life has changed ever since fracking, and I appreciate you hearing my comments today.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments. I appreciate it. Next, we have Christine Guldi. Are you on the line, Ms. Guldi?
I am. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Okay. Thank you for giving us this chance to comment. I was dismayed last year to read the EPA's assessment that there's no widespread groundwater pollution from fracking. I can just imagine the jigs performed by drilling apologists whose mantra has for years been, there has never been any water pollution caused by fracking. Yet, private individuals have for years reported contamination of their wells, and their observations have been confirmed by a mounting number of independent scientific reports. My written version of this has links to some of a list of those reports. 8 states plus 3 Canadian provinces have reported water contamination from fracking operations. My friends Steve Lipsky and Shelley Purdue and 20 of their neighbors in southern Parker County, Texas, had good well water until fracking began in their neighborhood. Shortly afterwards, their water turned brown. They haven't been able to drink it for 6 years. It contains explosive levels of methane. Those who still try to use their well water for bathing have to open their windows when they shower for safety. A driller told them they don't have water wells, they have gas wells. I guess the EPA report redefined these as gas wells rather than polluted water wells. The initial study by Clear of drinking water wells in the Barnett Shale found excessive arsenic and selenium levels in water within 3 kilometers of natural gas wells, but not in water beyond 3 kilometers of natural gas wells. That organization has expanded its studies of water wells in the Barnett Shale and has found BTEX compounds, which do not occur naturally in groundwater throughout the region. That sounds pretty widespread. The EPA report described faulty cement casings as one cause of groundwater contamination. In 2011 alone, 65 Marcellus Shale gas wells were cited for faulty cement casings. 65 sounds like a small number compared to the thousands of active wells in that play, but violations are self-reported. The literature is full of images illustrating how gas wells leak. I refer you to images in my written comments. State regulators whose campaign contributions come from oil and gas have little incentive to effectively regulate the fracking industry. The Texas Railroad Commission revised Rule 13 to require cementing all layers of rock that might contain oil and gas, but the commission allows Texas drillers to ignore the revised rule. Leaking well bores are only one potential violation that can contaminate groundwater. I again refer to the Marcellus Shale, where over half of the active wells reported violations. Carelessness and fraud are encouraged when the EPA says there's no evidence of widespread pollution of groundwater. Self-regulation has never been a good idea. Bridges and roads have strong federal controls on the use of concrete. Why can't the oil and gas industry? Are 8 states reporting groundwater contamination not sufficient to count as widespread? Does the EPA discount all possible sources of the pollution associated with the fracking wells operations? And as the industry loves to do, only count the explosive fracturing of rock at the bottom of the hole? The EPA has a responsibility to rise above such flimsy defenses of a dirty industry and protect our nation's water. In conclusion, the EPA used to work for public good, but now it's a shill for the fracking industry. It shouldn't take a reprimand from the Scientific Advisory Board for the EPA to tell the truth. I thank the board for being willing to look into this shameful report that was released last year.
Okay,
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Guldi, for your comments. Next on the list, we have Richard Guldi. Are you on, sir?
I'm here. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead.
Oh, very good. I'm Richard Guldi from Dallas. I have a PhD in engineering, and I worked for 35 years making reliable integrated circuits that don't crash your airplane. We did this without poisoning our neighbors with toxic chemicals. I'm appalled that the fracking industry has poisoned water and air all over America, but still tells us that they have never contaminated anything. During the March EPA teleconference, I mentioned that before the advent of unconventional fracking in 2009, Schlumberger reported that 5% of all fracked wells leaked within their first year of operation, and 50% leaked within 15 years. However, since unconventional fracking began, the first-year failure rate increased from 5% to 12%. We should expect all these wells to fail within 15 years. I have references in my written paper that I've sent. The oil and gas industry has little incentive to not cut corners. Blog comments describe examples where concrete workers race to complete the greatest number of jobs in a day, and where drilling repair workers lament having to fix their problems. The conventional fix is to reapply cement to a damaged area. Such fixes may provide cosmetic improvement or even the ability to pass an initial pressure test if it's done, but there's no way that concrete reapplied to a trouble spot deep in a well can make a lasting seal. It's easy to understand why these gas wells leak. Any civil engineer will tell you that concrete cracks sooner or later. Consider the difficulty of pouring concrete to create an annulus a foot in diameter, hundreds of feet deep, in a 1-inch wall thickness without microcracks. That's physically impossible. These microcracks will enlarge and grow into fractures as the result of stress over time. Now let's take a layman's viewpoint of concrete fractures and stress. We've all seen steel reinforcement rod called rebar placed into roads and sidewalks before concrete is poured to provide strength. Gas well casings do not have rebar. We've all seen stress relief recesses formed as joints in roads, bridges, and sidewalks. These recesses allow cracks to terminate at specific locations so they do not propagate indefinitely. Gas well casings do not have any stress relief recesses along their depth and length. Roads and sidewalks crack under normal usage, even though they have rebar and stress release recesses. Does anyone think that gas well casings won't crack? We are all aware of ground shifts, that they create stress on overlying structures. Clay soils, such as we have in North Texas, are prone to extensive expansion and contraction as moisture content varies. 80% of homes in North Texas show shifted door frames and misaligned cabinet doors within a few years of construction. In the hot, dry summer months, our school playground shows cracks so deep I can't reach the bottom. Our home suffered brick cracking when our clay soil experienced record swelling after 10 inches of rainfall in 1 week in October. Future weather extremes, exacerbated by climate change resulting from fossil fuels, will bring even greater risk of earth stresses on gas well casings. Increasing earthquake frequency and intensity will further weaken gas well casings. Stresses cause microcracks, which provide pathways for gas migration. Continued stresses lead to material rupture and large cracking, as in the familiar case of bending a coat hanger back and forth until it breaks. In conclusion, the EPA used to work for public good, but now it's only a shill for the fracking industry. It shouldn't take a reprimand by the Scientific Advisory Board to make the EPA tell the truth, and we thank the board for coming to bat for us. Nobody else does. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Guldi, or Dr. Guldi, for your comments. Next on our list is George Watson. Are you on, Mr. Watson.
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. My name is George Watson. I live in Center Township, Greene County, Pennsylvania. In November 2005, I lost my voice. I was diagnosed with larynx cancer. I went through 7 surgeries in less than 2 years, and I do a follow-up for the rest of my life every 3 to 6 months. In September 2007, I just built a new home on my 200-acre farm. 2 months later, the water turned orange in both my new home and my rental house. I've had to install Culligan systems in both homes at a cost of $8,500. Since then, I've spent in excess of $20,000, and my water is still bad. It's as orange, just looks like the water in Michigan did. I live a half a mile from West Greene High School, and the water authority told me the only way I'll get city water would be if the coal company or gas company would have to run the city water to my house. They told me it would cost about $500,000 for me to do it. And now it looks like there are problems with city water all over Greene County. In December 2008, I came home day after Christmas, found a dead cow by the creek. The creek runs through the middle of my farm. In the next 3 months, I lost 17 bred cows and 4 heifers. My veterinarian, Vicki Souls, Spring Hill Animal Clinic, did several tests on the cows and could not find the cause of death. I guess we should have been checking the stream. In 2012, Robert Allen Shipman of New Freeport, former owner of Allen's Wastewater Service Incorporated, entered an open guilty plea in Greene County Court to 13 counts stemming from a 2-year investigation that he illegally dumped millions of gallons of wastewater from natural gas drilling, sewage sludge, and restaurant grease into streams and mine shafts in a 6-county area. His business was located past my farm, and his trucks traveled past my home and farm 24/7. And the investigation went clear back to 2003. So I believe this tells about all of it. However, I would like to extend an open invitation to anyone on the advisory board to visit Greene County. And if they want to follow my case, I have a Superior Court hearing June the 22nd against Mr. Shipman in Pittsburgh. Now, I don't know whether I can win or not, but to the best of my knowledge right now, I'm into this thing for over $100,000. I'd just like to have my money reimbursed somehow. If they can pay everybody all over the place and pass the money around like they do, why can't they pay the people where they cause the problems? Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Watson, for your comments, and I'm sorry for your health issues. Yuri Gorby on the line. Okay.
Yes, hello. Hi.
Yes, is this Yuri Gorby?
Yes, it is.
Okay, well, please go ahead. We'll hear from you now.
Yes, hi. I want to apologize. I was under the impression that I was registered for the in-person meeting on the 14th, and so I don't have anything formally presentable here right now in terms of a statement. However, I do have sufficient scientific information, and there's sufficient published research that clearly states that water contamination from not only hydraulic fracturing but all related activities is ongoing, and in fact 2 recent publications that were released from the U.S. Geological Survey showing the compromise of water quality in streams in West Virginia surrounding areas where the liquid waste disposal is occurring is clear and evident. I believe that the Scientific Advisory Board has done an excellent job in actually addressing a number of the issues that were made obvious or quite obvious to both scientists and citizens who are aware of ongoing and increasing problems related to hydraulic fracturing and related activities, especially with regard to groundwater, although air quality is also something that's quite important. I believe that it is the responsibility now of that Scientific Advisory Board to advise the EPA that the prudent approach, given the published data sets that are now known for that relating contamination and these industrial activities, that there is sufficient reason to request a moratorium on further activities and to allow the science that is still ongoing to really reach its zenith. The contamination of groundwater that's occurring in my home state of West Virginia, in southwestern Pennsylvania, in northeastern Pennsylvania, in Dimmock, Texas, in Pavilion, Wyoming, in the New South Wales, in Australia. These areas, once contaminated, will not be able to be remediated. Hence, it is the necessity of the Environmental Protection Agency to protect those water resources from further contamination and allow the scientific community to step up and actually address the problems that have already occurred. This will require ongoing monitoring, so to avoid further, to basically assess the fate and transport of these contaminants as they further spread throughout our environment. It will be required to protect domestic water resources from lists of chemicals that are very difficult to identify and quantify. It will require public notification and then reaction to the health impacts that people will suffer from this ongoing contamination. Hence, in summary, I really, as a scientist with 15 years with the U.S. Department of Energy studying the fate and transport of contaminants in subsurface systems, I frankly have not seen anything like the ongoing and I would consider widespread contamination of water resources in areas where hydraulic fracturing and related activities are occurring. And so I do hope that I have the opportunity to speak in person on the 14th, but if that's not possible, I fully understand. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Gorby, for your comments. I appreciate it very much. Okay, next up would be Kimberly McAvoy. Are you on the line?
Hello?
Yes, Kimberly McAvoy, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you. My name is Kimberly McAvoy. I lived in Connie-Quinessing, Butler, PA. In 2011, my neighbors and I noticed a change in our water. Out of 143 people, 56 noted changes in the water after drilling occurred, and that was the only thing in our environment that changed was the introduction of Marcellus shale drilling. My water went from crystal clear to gray then to black. We could no longer bathe in our water or drink it. If I tried to bathe in it, I would become lightheaded and feel as though I could pass out. Peter, my boyfriend, complained about headaches, pain in his legs, and sinuses. I bathed my 3-year-old daughter in store-bought water I heated on the stove in a large canning pot. I contacted the gas company. They gave me a water buffalo a few days later. DEP came to test my water after I contacted the local news. The DEP had to remove my water well pump from the water buffalo, reinstall it into my well. This took all day. It was found that I had arsenic in my water. The gas company told me I had water problems because the leaves on my trees made my water black. I had those trees for 12 years and never had a problem. The gas company took my water buffalo away. So for 192 days, we hauled water from work to flush toilets, wash hands, do dishes, 30 gallons a day. We also bought basic needs, paper plates, plastic silverware, baby wipes. I also walked about a mile in the snow with my daughter to do laundry at a friend's honey cabin. I contacted the EPA about the water and the blue haze that loomed in the air in the valley. Even though nobody came to talk to me or did any testing, I received a letter saying my water and air were safe. I lost my home. In the end, it foreclosed. I worked really hard for a piece of the American dream. Peter, a veteran and 48 years old, moved up to a safer location after taking money from his retirement. I also found it insulting as to how we were treated by all levels of government and industry as though we had no common sense and we were expendable. A quote from Peter Sawatsky, as a veteran, I am severely disappointed as to how I was treated by the very country I volunteered for my life for. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Ms. McAvoy. Appreciate it. Next on the list is Leslie Beyer. Are you on, please?
Yes, I am.
Okay, please go ahead.
Thank you. Dr. Thorne and members of the Science Advisory Board, thanks for the opportunity to provide comment. My name is Leslie Beyer, and I'm the president of the Petroleum Equipment and Services Association, also known as PESA. PESA represents approximately 200 companies in the service, supply, and manufacturing sector of the oil and gas industry, and our members provide the technology, expertise, and equipment to safely and efficiently develop energy for human and economic progress. PESA members led the development of hydraulic fracturing, or HF, as a process to enhance the production of oil and gas during the 1940s and 50s and have been improving its effectiveness ever since. The knowledge and experience of PESA members is why EPA turned to some of them for information and subject matter expertise when it first launched this assessment. Indeed, the HF process has been extensively reviewed by multiple state regulators and numerous scientific experts. With this record of experience and review, PESA members welcomed the conclusion of EPA's draft assessment report that the agency did not find evidence that HF has led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources in the United States. This conclusion is sound, valid, and supported by EPA's comprehensive review, outside expertise, and published scientific research. PESA urges the SAB to focus on these scientific analyses as it completes the peer review. The scientific backing for EPA's conclusion has been provided not only in the assessment report, but also in research studies highlighted by PESA and many others. Many of these studies are also referenced in the dissenting opinion to the draft SAB review and authored by several members of the HF Research Advisory Panel. In light of the significant level of review, it's concerning that the draft SAB review argues that more work is needed because there is a lack of evidence of impacts from HF on drinking water. More than 2 million wells in the U.S. have been stimulated by HF since the process was developed, around half of all wells drilled since 1859. The lack of evidence of impacts on drinking water is not due to a deficit of analysis or data. Instead, it's due to the overwhelming evidence that HF does not have widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources. Further, it's important that the assessment report follow the congressional mandate and focus on cases and activities related directly to HF. However, a review of the assessment report and SAB's draft review finds several situations where cases and activities unrelated to HF are addressed, putting the clarity and accuracy of the assessment report at risk. For example, the draft SAB review recommends EPA include investigations into drinking water contamination in Dimock, Pennsylvania, Pavilion, Wyoming, and Parker County, Texas, when investigations have demonstrated there is no connection between HF and drinking water well issues in those areas. Including results from these unrelated investigations would not advance understanding of impacts to drinking water resources by HF. Additionally, EPA's assessment report is broader in scope than HF, potentially creating a misleading impression for the public that HF operations have had an impact on drinking water. To ensure technical clarity, it's very important to distinguish which impacts are directly associated with HF. PESA's previous comments outline a number of opportunities for technical clarification, and we hope those points are incorporated as the process moves forward. When engaging in well development activities, including HF, PESA members and their partners across the industry utilize proven equipment and technologies. They follow industry risk management practices and comply with multi-layered federal and state regulatory requirements. These are the reasons behind the draft assessment report's conclusions that EPA has not found evidence that HF has led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources in the U.S. The industry, especially the service supply and manufacturing sector that we represent, is focused on continuing improvement, both through refining standards and developing innovative technologies. PESA urges the SAB and EPA to fully account for ongoing efforts across industry to develop new technologies and improve practices to ensure the assessment report contains the most up-to-date information. Further, state regulators are updating regulations, collaborating with industry, and working through partnerships such as the Groundwater Protection Council and the Interstate Oil and Gas Compact Commission to ensure laws are tailored to reflect local conditions and that the public has meaningful information through platforms such as FracFocus.
You're at 4.5 minutes, Ms. Beyer. If you could wrap up.
States have proven nimble at, I've got 3 more sentences,
Sure.
maintaining regulatory requirements that keep up with technology and best practices, protecting the environment while allowing for the development of oil and natural gas resources. PISA members are proud of the role they've played in developing technologies and practices, including HF, that have allowed the U.S. to develop oil and gas resources in an environmentally responsible manner. These achievements wouldn't have been possible without a focus on sound science, and we urge the SAB to maintain this focus as it completes its peer review of the EPA's draft assessment report. And
Okay.
that concludes our comments. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Beyer. I appreciate it. Next up is B. Arrindell. Are you on the phone, please?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, please
Hello?
go ahead. Yes, I can hear you. Please
Okay,
go ahead.
thank you. We strongly support the SAB panel's recommendations to remove the unsubstantiated no widespread statement as not related to data and totally undefined. The necessity to clearly link statements to evidence provided in the body of the final assessment report is indicative of the difference between a scientific analysis of data and a propaganda statement. Also, yes, we support the SAB recommendation to include and critically analyze the status, data on potential releases, and any available findings from the EPA and state investigations conducted in Dimock, Pennsylvania, Pavilion, Wyoming, and Parker County, Texas. This should include the Garfield County Impact Statement Study, all suppressed data from Dimock, and all data from Parker County, including tests done by residents. All available EPA, state, and reliable residents' data should be in the study to have a robust data pool. These might be considered local impacts, but along with many other areas suffering from the results of fracking and associated processes, the idea that local means dismiss, irrelevant, not important is so wrong. Local multiplied makes regional. Water flows to rivers, and many contaminants are harmful at very low concentrations. Real people are suffering real damage, and there will be more. There is an explanation for the dismissal of local and of damage to individuals and whole communities, a combination of environmental injustice and the fact of the exemptions pursued and held by the gas and oil industry. There are so many papers, many of them from the drilling industry, that detail the way the drilling processes and hydraulic fracturing cause damage and how that damage cannot be corrected. It is obvious why they needed the exemptions, to isolate the companies from liability for damages they knew they would cause. I have an abbreviated list of documentation in my written comments. As for the company's focus on poor rural communities, here's just one of many examples. Quote, Range Resources Vice President for Legislative and Regulatory Affairs told the Pennsylvania Bar Institute gathering in Harrisburg in April that the company tries to avoid siting its shale gas wells near big houses, where residents might have the financial resources to challenge the industry-type developments, unquote. That was in a media report. Please understand that there will never be prospective studies. The industry already knows the processes mess up where they work, so do not expect them to participate in proving the damages result from these processes. They already know. That is why they work for decades to get the exemptions, and that is why they buy out and force gag orders on effective communicators of damage, so that public knowledge of the damage is hidden, but remember that the public health impact is not removed. I'm also submitting in my written comments the newly released Dimock ATSDR report and the older Dimock leaked EPA PowerPoint. Both say there is ongoing damage. One thing I greatly disagree with in the SAB panel's report is the stress on how the perceived damages may be, quote, temporary though substantial, unquote. There's no data that the impacts are temporary, so how can the panel say that they might be? We are supposed to be fact-based in this study, yes? Actually, there are measurements that show the continuing impacts. For instance, in the Terry Township Wyalusing area where DCS has taken measurements of the gas migration event that started in 2010 and is still ongoing as shown by CRDS measurements in 2015.
Ms. Arrindell, you're at 4.5 minutes.
Once there is aquifer connection to formation layers and movements of gas, materials impacted and from the layers, etc., there's permanent damage, with places, people, and communities suffering from continuing degradation of once usable water. Please take these situations seriously. It's not about company profits or stockholders' opinion of the companies. This is about whether areas where drilling has occurred can support healthy life or are evacuation zones with heavy human, environmental, and climate impacts. The Pennsylvania Alliance for Clean Water and Air has maintained a list of people, families impacted by fracking and related activities. As of March 25, 2016, there are 21,557 on this list. This is widespread damage. The link is in my written comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Arrindell. I appreciate it. Okay, so at this juncture, I'd like to pause for a moment and ask if members of the Science Advisory Board have any follow-on questions or clarifying questions they'd like to ask of any of the first 8 speakers we've had.
Yes, Mike Dourson, sir.
Okay, I heard Mike Dourson. Was there another one too?
Jim Mihalcik has a question.
Okay, and Jim Mihalcik, okay. Anyone else? Okay, Mike Dourson.
Yes, this is a comment to Dr. Guldi, and it's not so much, I appreciate his commentary, and in fact I appreciate the commentary of everyone so far, but I want to encourage Dr. Guldi to talk to a Ms. Beth Voiles or Voiles. In his written comments, she talks about a particular sequence of events, and the sequence of events looks to me to be hydrogen sulfide poisoning, and it's a serious concern for herself and her family, so they need to check this like right now. It's caused by a number of things, sewage lines or broken sewage lines or yet another form of this, but it's not to be trifled with. So I encourage him to contact this gentle person right away and have that checked out. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mike. So it's a potential dangerous situation, immediately dangerous to life and health, and should be followed up. Okay, Jim Mihalcik, go ahead, please.
Peter, I more have a question for EPA ORD staff or members of the advisory panel that's related to a comment, so I didn't know if this was the appropriate time or if you'd like to wait till our face-to-face meeting next week. So it's an item that was brought up by some of the comments.
Okay, well, why don't we hear it now?
Okay, so my question is, the Hydraulic Fracturing Research Advisory Panel brought up in its report the issue of EPA's high-level conclusion statement that was focused on national-level conclusions versus the scale of impacts. And several of the comments we heard suggested localized mobilization of reduced iron or manganese. So I'd like to just know from EPA ORD staff that might be on the line or from a member of the advisory panel whether the ORD report had addressed what appears to be local observations on secondary drinking water constituents.
Okay. Tom, Tom Carpenter, do you know if any ORD staff are on?
Jeff Fritzen may be on the phone, but Peter, this might be better to tee up issues and identify them and keep them in a parking lot for the June 14th when we have some members of the panel will be available to us that are not available to us today. And I'm not sure if Dr. Dezombach has been able to stay on the call at this point.
Okay,
I'm still on the call. This is Dave Dezombach. I'm still on the call, but I really think this would be better discussion to have next week because we'll have time for all the members of the panel to join the discussion, and I think it'll slow down the commentary today quite a bit to start that today.
Yeah. So I think for that reason and the fact that we should have more EPA staff available to provide responses, we should do just that. So I've made a note of that, Jim, and we'll make sure that we address that next week, and that we'll try to have appropriate expertise available to have a discussion about that. So thank you, Jim. Okay, any other SAB members with follow-up before we move on? I will continue on then. The next person on the list we've got to speak is Stephen Lipsky. Are you on the line, Mr. Lipsky?
I'm on the line.
Okay, please go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
First of all, okay, good. I would like to thank the panel for giving me an opportunity to speak again. This July will be the 6-year anniversary. We discovered that our water was saturated with methane, and if lit with a match would sustain a flame. When I discovered this problem, I truly thought my government would be all over this. I imagined men in white suits with protective gear investigating this problem. I never could imagine the nightmare that was going to begin, and I would be painted as an enemy of the state. The federal EPA, ignoring the president who just said we have a great natural gas resource in our country, tried to do the right thing. The staff at the EPA had been seeing contamination across the country and wanted to use the power of the government to protect the people, not the industry profits. Those seeking and speaking the truth about the danger of industrial gas extraction do so at great personal risk and expense. We do not speak out because it's easy, it's fun, or we can't think of a better thing to do with our afternoon. We speak out because we have to, because it's the right thing to do for our children, for our grandchildren, and for those who believe in America as a land of the free and not the land of the bought and paid for. I have learned that fossil fuel strong-arm politics can silence even those working at the EPA. While the testing done in 2010 is rudimentary compared to today's technology, even back then, the EPA's own testing clearly showed them that my family's water was dangerous to use. The EPA understood fossil fuel politics and believed that the Texas regulators were busy protecting the industry and not my family. Believing they had an obligation to help me, they issued an emergency order in December of 2010 stating that my water was unfit to use and the gas company was responsible for the contamination. Irate with this, Obama's EPA had done and its intrusion into the Texas saw this as an insult to its state rights. Industry and Texas regulators acted with unprecedented speed and immediately scheduled their own hearing on this issue. While Range was able and did literally spend millions of dollars putting on a dog and pony show in less than 30 days and burying the regulators with thousands of pages of documents, they were able to obscure the facts and rely primarily on volumes of generally inconclusive evidence they presented. The fact is when the staff regulator, the evidence presented upon which the elected commissioner would ultimately rule, the staff concluded the answer to the question of whether there was a connection between the Range, Butler, and Teal wells and the natural gas and Lipsky's water well is proven neither obvious or easy to come by. The company heavily relies upon Texas hearing as evidence that they did not contaminate my well. The fact all the regulator hearing shows is that when Texas oil and gas is threatened by accountability by Obama's EPA, the full force and power of the industry and the Texas government will be raised in the defense of the industry. I never had a chance, which is bad enough, but this same scenario plays across the country. And once people start talking about energy independence and waving the American flag, those with the courage to speak out are attacked, marginalized, and dismissed as somehow out to make a quick buck. Over the past 6 years, my water has been tested by many different agencies, universities, scientists, and labs. All the testing protocols and techniques have only improved since 2010. All my testing shows that my concentration methane of my water is not only high, but it might be the highest level of any residential well in the world. There are some testing methods that are more accurate than others. True methane concentration testing requires that the methane not to be allowed to gas off, like testing cola for carbonation. After it's sat outside for a while, and it may be flat. This doesn't mean that it was flat when it came out of the soda bottle. The lowest numbers that came from Range Resources testing showing 2 and 2.3 milligrams per liter, and the Texas Railroad Commission always showing well under 10 milligrams per liter. The testing done by others using techniques to preserve this carbonation, as it were, have shown 50 or 60 plus milligrams per liter. The last time the Texas Railroad Commission did their testing, they claimed that my water was visibly clearly effervescent. What this means is the methane was so concentrated that it begins to separate from the water and can be observed with the naked eye. This is also called saturation. This is like seeing carbonation in champagne. With methane saturation, effervescent is only visible when it has reached levels over 28 milligrams per liter. The Texas Railroad Commission could not offer any explanation why their test results show methane levels under 10 milligrams per liter when they observed saturation.
You're at 4.5 minutes, Mr. Lipsky.
Okay, do not manage your testing back at the lab. Almost all evidence given by the Texas Railroad Commission has either been shown to be false or inaccurate. If the Texas Railroad Commission arranged such a good and thorough job in reviewing this contamination, then why are they so scared for someone else to take a second look? I'm not claiming that all drilled gas wells will cause the same level of contamination. I suffered. But can we afford if even a small percent result in such catastrophic damage? Clean air and drinkable water are the two most important resources we have as humans to live. We don't have a replacement for air and water. Can our country afford to destroy entire water aquifers? I just want to thank you for your time again, and thanks for reviewing this all for us. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Lipsky. Next on the list is Randoll Gulla. Are you on, sir?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, is it Gulla?
Yes.
Please go ahead.
I would like to stress in these short few minutes of oral comments that the impacts of hydraulic fracture drilling and associated processes have harmed water supplies in every area I have visited, impacted people and communities over the 10 years I have been speaking out about the subject. I have personally visited hundreds of homes and businesses, most of them in Pennsylvania, but also in West Virginia and Ohio, and spoken with people in Colorado, Wyoming, Texas, Arkansas, North Dakota, and in Canada about their water and health problems, all living near drilling, infrastructure, and waste sites, and have water quality and quantity issues in addition to health impacts since drilling started in their areas. And this includes my own family and farm, which was in Hickory, PA. My story is with my written comments. I have also talked to or visited with many thousands more over the 10 years who have turned away from leasing or slowed their community's acceptance of the activities because they learned what the true impacts are where it has taken place. Only those who have money for testing or lawsuits and or are striking effective communicators, making the public aware of their situation, are able to salvage their family's largest investment and get out. Many of the impacted people have been silenced by being forced to sign non-disclosure gag agreements in order to be able to move out of harm's way. The harm has still been done and still remains as hidden public health perils. The public having knowledge of what has occurred is vital to all data available for the EPA study. Demick, PA, Parker County, Texas, and Pavilion, Garfield County, Wyoming have to be included in the study as the SOB panel recommends. Water is more important than gas. No farms, no food, is what my friend Terry Greenwood, who lived and farmed in Daisytown, PA, often said as he lived his years-long nightmare from nearby drilling that killed his cattle, destroyed his farm's water supply, and destroyed his health. His story is with my written comments. These local impacts to water supplies are actually not just local because water flows. For instance, Greene County, PA, contaminated water from gas well connectivity to aquifers and to streams from spills, from deliberate dumping, from gas well leaks, from flood events, all led to the Monongahela River. The Mon River supplies almost 400,000 people, including the city of Pittsburgh, with their drinking water, and several times the recipients of that water supply were urged to not drink it. what is still in the Mon River mud? Chemicals, radioactivity. Drinking water supplies in PA are tested for radioactivity, but only once every 9 years and only one grab sample. All the upriver dumping, spills, etc. go into the next municipality's drinking water. I know managers of drinking water facilities, for example, Beaver Falls Municipal Authority, that cannot supply their customers with sufficiently clean water because of upriver legal frack water plants dumping frack waste that is basically untreated into their river. Beaver Falls details are with my written comments. Mitigation, meaning how are these situations to be corrected? How and when ever could these injured places get back clean water? I must ask. Can they ever? I don't think so. These are permanent changes with regional impacts. Everywhere there is drilling, there are impacts. Different names, different faces, different towns, different states, same pattern. They are widespread impacts. Once happening in so many instances, the impacts on people's water quality is hardly temporary. There are lots of examples that have gone on for years. There's way too many to mention, but there's a few besides my farm. Angel and Wayne Smith and their farm, Clearville, PA. Miss Smitsky in Hickory, PA. Terry Greenwood and family farm in Daisytown, PA. Chris and Steph Hallowich and family in Hickory, PA. Jeannie Moten home and her mother's home in Avella, PA. Shirley and Jesse Akins in Avella, PA. Jim Sheehan, Avella, PA. George Watson and his farm, Waynesburg, PA. John and Beth Voiles, Amwell, PA. Stacy Haney, Amwell, PA. Kiskadden family, Amwell, PA. Carol French, Ulster, Bradford County, PA. Michael Bastian, Bradford County, PA. Over 40 families who were residents in Demick, PA. Jeremiah G. and his family, Potter County, PA. Scenery Hill, PA. Ellen and Carl Donahue, Scenery Hill, PA. Over 50 families in the Woodlands area, Conecuh-Nesson, PA. 6 families in Pulaski, Lawrence County, PA. Marilyn Robert Hunt, Wetzel County, West Virginia. Barney Hall, Wetzel County, West Virginia. Rick Rolls, Garfield County, Colorado. Steve Mavaldi and his deceased wife, Chris, Rifle, Colorado. Thomas Thompson, Garfield County, Colorado. And there's so many more. Thank you, gentlemen. We need your help.
Okay, thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Gulla. Next up on the list is Jack Kreull. Are you on?
Yes, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Please go ahead,
Hello?
sir. Yes,
Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, I'm Jack. Okay, thank you. My name is Jack Kreull. I reside in an impacted area in southwestern Pennsylvania, which encompasses Greene, Washington, Fayette, and Westmoreland County. The air quality and water quality are digressing in this area, along with the aquifers, the springs, and wells. The Monongahela River and its tributaries have been severely affected. Several named creeks and discharge points which enter the Monongahela River, as of comprehensive testing, showed the seven signature aspects to the drilling. The signature aspects are sodium, strontium, bromide, radium-226, 228, high electric conductivity, and total dissolved solids. It is evident of chemical pollution in both air by vaporization and flaring operations and water by injection and dilution. It is listed of 800 chemicals used, 650 are carcinogen in nature. Most municipal authorities who draw from the Mon River are having highly elevated chloride levels and highly elevated bromide levels, which lead to trihalomethane warnings sent out to each of their customers. In short, the level of tested creeks and mine discharge points along the Mon have showed radium-226 and 228 60 to 80 times higher than what is permitted in drinking water, noting likewise that depleted uranium has been used in perf guns in the industrial process. In overview, there are elevated levels of chlorine, bromide, strontium, barium, radium, oxygen, thorium, hydrogen isotopic composites of the effluent reflects the composite of Marcellus-produced liquids. Gentlemen, remember this term. You're going to be hearing it more. Radium bioaccumulation. As the disposal aspects of these wastes, such as drill cuttings, brines, flowback sludges, I reside a tenth of a mile from such a facility, which in 2014 accepted 84 million pounds of classified hazardous waste with T-norm involved in it. It is a residual waste landfill, but it accepted the hazardous materials. This facility was constructed over an old coal mine. The landfill is engineered now in airspace as a pyramid. Recently, there were subsidence issues at elevations which would be under the landfill and voids opening up. Readings, 35 feet from the voids were 7 to 9 microrens. At the opening, we were 30 to 35 microrem. Into the void, 40 to 45 microrem, and further in, 50. The coal seam runs 20 to 90 feet with overburden. This is not a radon issue. We have containment issues. Where does the water go from these abandoned mines? They go into the Monongahela River. Initial water tests at some of these discharge points had super high conductivity. The 2015 PA-DEP T-norm report, as reviewed by the Delaware River Keepers, set number 1, all landfills who accepted the waste, the leachate contained radium. Number 2, where does this facility's leachate end up? In the Mon River by a pipeline to a sewage treatment plant, which can remove none of the chemicals nor the radium and its sisters. We now have highly elevated background readings in the air and water. The norm background readings in these areas close to these facilities are much higher. 15 to 20 years ago, this was not an issue in this part of Pennsylvania. Some of the factors, the DEP says, well, it's from the coal industry. No, none of the pollutants have coal's signature, and besides, they're not exempt from the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. And as a start, no one should be exempt from the Clean Air and Clean Water Act. So as our problems go on here, Big Oil says, well, none of this can be us. We didn't do that. We operate safe. The enforcement agencies tell me, well, we don't know. It's phenomena. You know, being cynical and what I have to go through every day, remembering 9/11, I now recall national security was worried about our water sources and our reservoirs and was setting up air detection for radiation from small...
You're at 5 minutes, Mr. Kreull. Could you wrap up?
Okay. Yep.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Kreull. Okay, so next up is Jesse Sandlin.
Hey,
Are you on?
yeah, thanks for hosting the call and providing feedback. I'm Jesse Sandlin with Devon Energy. I first want to talk a little bit about the SAB review of the report. I want to commend the SAB for the work they've done in reviewing the document, as well as the synthesis and compilation of the data submissions, public commentary, and published literature. It's a burdensome task, and the work of the SAB should be celebrated. That said, there are some inconsistencies within the report that I want to highlight for correction in any future revisions of the SAB review document. First, under clarity and support for major findings, the SAB review document expresses concern with the high-level conclusion statement that EPA did not find evidence that these mechanisms have led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources within the United States. The SAB review recommends a slight revision of this statement, arguing that data limitations and uncertainties are not adequately addressed in the major findings portion of the HF study report. I have two main contentions with the suggestion that the statement needs revision. First, I believe the statement itself is clear, unambiguous, and concise.
Yeah.
It contains each of the necessary elements of the findings of the report in a synopsis, as is intended for an executive summary level major finding. First, the lack of identification of widespread systemic impacts is an accurate characterization of the report itself and of the state-of-the-art scientific research with regard to hydraulic fracturing. The report, looking at data from across the United States, including data from hundreds of cited, referenced primary sources, was able to find a very limited set of individual impacts. And even within that subset of impacts, an even smaller percentage were traced to the hydraulic fracturing process itself, not simply linked to oil and gas development generally. The statement then further qualifies that key finding with the inclusion of the phrase, "we did not find evidence." This qualification is important. It clarifies that even after an exhaustive search through the literature and through gathering of empirical data on the more than 2 million wells which have undergone hydraulic fracturing treatment, the EPA researchers were unable to identify evidence of widespread systemic impacts. The statement recognizes that data gaps, and then those data gaps themselves are further elucidated in the report, but the main overall conclusion remains. Second, the requested revision actually contradicts the statements made elsewhere in the SAB panel review document. The SAB review states the EPA's overall approach to be appropriate and comprehensive, that the EPA adequately described the findings of the available scientific literature just a few paragraphs before suggesting EPA make changes to their major findings. The SAB must be consistent that either the EPA in its comprehensive near 1,000-page study adequately described what is present in the scientific literature, or that instead they miss something that the SAB can then provide. Given that there's not an additional evidence that the EPA's major finding is scientifically incorrect in the review document, it is clear that some members of the SAB in this instance have focused instead on the media perception, semantics, and language of the statement itself. This is also supported by the statement in the review that the SAB observes that the statement has been interpreted by readers and members of the public in many different ways. However, the study review is not about public perception. It has always been about understanding the scientific facts. The plain meaning of the statement that EPA was not able to find evidence of widespread systemic impacts to drinking water resources in the U.S. is a fair and accurate characterization of the findings of the rest of the document. To suggest otherwise without suggesting where the statement is technically inaccurate intentionally undermines the credibility of the more than 70 authors, contributors, and reviewers of the study up to this point. The SAB suggests that systemic widespread impacts need to be defined within the major findings, that the system of interest is not clearly defined. Even ignoring the fact that the words themselves in this combination have a near singular potential meaning, the meaning of each is painstakingly clarified in the report itself where that clarification belongs. I also want to focus just a couple minutes on responding to some of the comments that have been posted on the meeting docket's meeting materials section, specifically a letter dated April 20th, 2016 from Americans Against Fracking Coalition. This letter includes a series of ad hominem criticisms on a small group of SAB panel members, including that somehow that their combined experience of greater than a century working in oil and gas development, completions, and technology disqualifies them for membership on the panel and for influence on the review of the document, and therefore their dissent should be ignored or discredited. The letter itself provides no scientific evidence that the dissent they authored is lacking. It simply postulates that the industry had some disproportionate impact on the writing of the major findings of the study. Not only is the criticism inappropriate and non-scientific, but the criticism completely ignores the fact that the statement the dissenters are defending was not authored by any of them themselves. The statement that EPA did not find evidence that these mechanisms had led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources in the U.S. did not have its genesis in the SAB review dissent. Instead, the major findings of the HF study report came from the authors, contributors, and reviewers of the study, who over the course of several years spent a significant portion of their time, energy, resources, and intellect to assess the potential impact of hydraulic fracturing on drinking water resources in the U.S. as directed by Congress.
You're at 4.5 minutes, Mr. Sandlin.
Thank you. Among these more than 70 authors are PhD-holding environmental scientists, toxicologists, chemists, engineers, working for EPA and the Cadmus group and the other groups that they worked with. The major finding was not written by a group of amateurs. It was carefully crafted to adequately describe the findings of a report that likely consumed the authors' lives for multiple years. Criticism levied at the credibility of the dissenting SAB members is then inherently also levied at the professionals at EPA who crafted the statement that the dissenters are now in the position to defend. Thank you for the time and the ability to provide some comments.
Please, Dr. Ingraffea, can you go ahead, please?
Thank you. I am Anthony Ingraffea, the Dwight C. Baum Professor Emeritus at Cornell University. I have followed the development of this EPA draft final report very closely, and I participated in 3 of the workshops associated with its development. I would first like to thank the EPA for its work under trying circumstances. It was clear from the beginning of the study's scoping activity that the oil and gas industry wanted to severely limit the project to potential impacts on drinking water from hydraulic fracturing alone. I applaud the EPA for resisting this pressure and defining and executing its study within the scope of the entire hydraulic fracturing water cycle. However, my major criticism of the draft final report is that it currently fails to address 2 very important fundamental issues with respect to shale. Those issues are scale and spatial intensity in this complete water cycle. As you have heard, there have been over 3.5 million oil and gas wells developed in the U.S., and that over 1 million of those have been fracked, long before public concern about fracking became manifest and the Congress mandated the present study. So why the intense concern 70 years after the commercial application of fracking? I assert that the answer, not yet properly regarded in this draft report, is the approximately 70,000 shale gas and oil wells developed over the last 20 years, and especially the majority of those developed over the last decade. Why should there be so much concern over so few wells? The answer is not fracking. The answer is shale. First, shale gas and oil wells redefine the scale of the problem. The total amount of water and chemicals used in fracking those 70,000 shale wells far exceeds the total amount used in the 1 million conventional wells previously fracked. Concomitantly, the total amount of waste flowback and so-called produced water emanating from those 70,000 shale wells far exceeds the total from those previous 1 million fracked wells. Consequently, one should expect that the risks and impacts associated with such prodigious volumes being handled over such a relatively short time period and in such relatively small enclaves would be elevated beyond those previously seen. The second issue, the geology and chemistry of shale require markedly increased well spatial intensity, typically 8 or more wells per square surface mile. Each of these wells is a potential leak path of hydrocarbons to underground sources of drinking water. And our research, as cited in the draft report, has shown that the rate of leakage from faulty casing and cement jobs in modern shale gas wells under so-called tight regulation is no better than historical leak rates. One should therefore expect large numbers of incidents of water well contamination within counties with intense shale hydrocarbon development. The most recent EIA natural gas supply projection has shale gas alone increasing by 93% between 2012 and 2040. Given historical decline rates in shale gas wells, this means that there will need to be hundreds of thousands of producing shale gas wells in the year 2040. But this means there will need to be millions of shale gas wells drilled before that date. The draft report utterly fails to project the scale and spatial intensity issues I just described onto this incredible number of projected additional wells. In Pennsylvania alone, only about 10% of the projected shale gas wells have been drilled to date, but there have been well over 100 PADEP confirmed cases of private water well contamination, and I declare that looking at the state of Pennsylvania and looking at what's happened so far, you have widespread and systemic influence on the state scale and much more to come. The draft report is a wanting snapshot of the present impacts on the hydraulic fracturing water cycle. I repeat, it fails completely to credibly address future impacts. Thank you for your time and effort.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Ingraffea, for your comments. Those folks, Jill Cook, are you on?
Sure, hi. I appreciate the opportunity to join you today to discuss this report. I am just a concerned citizen. I live in Virginia, and I just wanted to make a couple of comments about your hydraulic fracturing and groundwater report. We have we're blessed with great resources here in the U.S., leading producer of oil and natural gas, and that is great benefit to our citizens and to our businesses. The reason I bring this up and relating to your report is because of the attacks that hydraulic fracturing has come under, by various groups in this country. I know people view any activity association with carbon-based fuels are inherently bad, and people have many different opinions in this country on carbon and climate change. But basically what we're talking about here is the job of your committee. Your committee is to to review your committee is tasked with reviewing the evidence and telling people the truth based on the facts. That is why you're created by science. The Scientific Advisory Board is tasked with that very job, in which in looking through your report, I can commend you on doing a very thorough and inclusive job on that. I think that it was an exhaustive view of the issue to date. I know some people have talked about, in the future, but you've done what you have basically to shed light on this issue so people can understand it. We can't let our country be dependent on other countries, energy-producing countries, especially in the Middle East. We need to take advantage of the resources that America has and do the best with that. And I think you have really brought to light what the benefits and what the procedures can entail. And I thank you. And I have a very simple message for you today. Keep it very brief. Stand by the fact that you came out with in your original report, and keep doing the very good job you're doing. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for your comments, Ms. Cook. A.J. Randoll, are you on, please?
Yes, sir, I am.
Oh, sorry, A.G. Randoll. Excuse me. Please go ahead, Mr. Randoll.
Close enough.
Okay.
Good. Look, I think you and the SAB have done a great job. I'll just give you a couple of comments I think you may want to consider for the next round, and not before you wrap up the report. First, your basic findings are right on target, but you continue to identify local effects versus national. I would strongly recommend that you actually break out some of the issues as local and perhaps in different regions, different formations like the Marcellus. We have a mix and match of all these issues, and there may be a set of issues that are pertinent to Pennsylvania. So I think you need to document how different they may be between areas and different formations. You have issues like how much groundwater, how much surface water, how many streams, all the things that affect the ultimate impact. So I think the whole issue is, if there's a lot of conversation about one region in southwest Pennsylvania, I ought to focus on that, and I actually break it out so it doesn't get confused with your overall report. But it's very helpful to have the local focus, because there may be issues that are unique. There may be cross-contaminants, all kinds of issues that need to be considered. The next thing is, I can't tell if there was not enough, there was no input from the state authorities that regulate oil, gas, and water. Can you answer the question? Were there members of the committee, I couldn't tell from their bios, whether or not you had regulators who actually have to worry about this stuff locally? Because typically you have, like in Virginia, you've got different environmental organizations versus minerals and production. So we have two organizations, but they oversee all this activity. And in fact, here in Virginia, they even use hydraulic fracturing for water wells, okay? Because you have to go down deep enough, you can't get enough porosity, so you're allowed to fracture to get drinking water. So I think the whole idea is to at least have a profile in some of the key states, and you may be able to overlay some of that data. You mentioned there were a couple of state reports that you looked at, trying to draw a conclusion, but I think there's more data out there that would be very helpful to everyone. The IOGCC has attempted to kind of come up with a framework, but they're typically going to be best practices on issues in certain areas. So you need to document those, because a national report like this doesn't have any impact until you can understand and bring them down to at least the state level, understand if they're getting the job done right. The next comment is there are a lot of engineering best practices that need to be identified. If you're talking about cementing wells, that's one issue. When you're talking about whether or not you line pits for waste disposal, that's another. But there are a lot of areas where best practices are already being implemented that are not captured in your report or the studies that you cited. I think it would serve everyone quite well if you at least broke those out, like in a table, talk about the best practices, because if you take a snapshot in 2010 or 2012, there may have been an advancement in a best practice being applied by a regulatory agency locally, and we need to understand whether or not that is being done and to characterize what the impact is. I think you made one comment in there that if you cement the well below the formation for drinking water, groundwater, there's a 1,000-time improvement over the impact of controlling the intermingling. So that's kind of key. That's kind of lost in there because of just one statement. So the question is there any other regulation that applies the same approach? That look, we want you to cement your well below the groundwater formation. So those are kind of the issues that would overlay kind of like a practicality issue on top of this. And I think you need to take advantage of what the local regulators are doing, both in terms of resource management and water quality control. So that would be very helpful. Now let me just make a generic comment. I live in Virginia. We got a problem. They're trying to drive us more and more towards natural gas. Now a lot of people who've been on this phone have already been dead set against using coal. So we already have EPA trying to phase out as much coal as great. So all of a sudden we're being forced to use something that they don't want us to produce. Now we had a shot at producing in the George Washington National Forest on the periphery. That's an extension of Marcellus. But everybody said, well, we can't do this. So the reality check is we have to have a balance between environmental goals and energy supply. It's crucial for everyone, especially the poor and the people who can't afford it. Thank you very much, and keep up the good work.
All right. Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Randoll. Next, I'd like to ask if Dana Donley is on the line. Well, we're getting some echo. Much better. Thank you very much. Go ahead, please.
Okay, I apologize for that. Just wanted to state that we have 3 people going back to back and sharing the same telephone. So we will make our comments if you can just let us know when the time is coming close, and then we can pass the phone to the other person. We have some issues down here. We don't have the internet, and we only have 2 phones to work from. Anyway, my name is Dana Donley, not Donley, D-O-L-N-E-Y. And I'm the director of a small volunteer organization called Friends of the Harmed, and we are publishers of a publication called Shalefield Stories. I submitted Shalefield Stories Volume 2 as our testimony, which you will find on page 22, Ron Gulla's story. On page 21 is Kim McAvoy's story. And on page 11 is Shirley and Jesse Aiken's story. We have been working outside of this community, outside of Cross Creek Park in Ray, Pennsylvania, which is right outside of Avella, PA, which was part of the study that the EPA did. I have personally been working in this area for the last 4 years, but I became associated with Shirley and Jesse Aiken about 2 years ago. So I wanted to give Jesse an opportunity to speak first for him and Shirley. Shirley's out of town right now, so I have a small statement to read on her behalf, but I'm going to allow Jesse to talk about his experiences first, and then I'm going to allow Jeannie Moten to talk about her experiences, and then I, as someone that's worked in the area, will finish up with the statement. Okay? So first is going to be Jesse Aiken.
Hello.
Hello. Go ahead, please.
This is Jesse Aiken. I live in the village of Ray. I've been here for over 50 years. I've always had good water. But about 8 years ago, they drilled a well about 1,000 foot up on the hill above my well, and that's when my water went bad, and we haven't drank that water for 8 years now. We had trouble at first where white sand was coming, blocking our faucets. And the next thing, a bunch of white foam come out of the hill behind us, and about a 20-foot square, and another one up by my well, and another one down below that. And they killed the grass, and it's been 8 years and the grass is still dead. And we had other problems here where I pumped water out of my well to water my garden. In 2 weeks, my whole garden died. One night early on when it first started up here, we woke up at 2 o'clock in the morning, and the smoke alarm and my carbon monoxide alarms were going off at the same time, and the only way I could stop them was take the batteries out of them. But we had other problems here with trees dying. I planted all these trees on this property when I moved here, and I had pine trees about 40 feet high, and right now I've already lost 9 of them because they died. And I've also lost 5 peach trees, 2 plum trees, and 1 one snowball bush died, and now my chestnut trees are starting to look a little funny. So it's just one thing after another here, and something got to be done. There's water ain't very far from here, only about 3 miles up the road if they pump city water in. And right down the mile from me is Vella High School. They got 5 wells down there, and they've been drilling under them wells. They better look out. They might have a little bit of trouble with that down there if they don't keep their eyes open. I thank you very much if you people help us in any way, but I think that these people who ruin something, they should fix whatever they break. I thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eakin.
Okay, now we're going to give Jeannie Moten.
Okay, Jeannie Moten, please go
an
ahead.
Opportunity to speak.
Hello, my name is Jeannie Moten, and I've spoken before the EPA several years ago at the South Point location. My father passed away, and I believe that the reason why he passed away was there's 154 milligrams of sodium in the water. He had a stroke. He was in fine physical health. He was an older gentleman. However, he didn't know what happened. His blood pressure went up to 254. I had a stroke. I'm only 57 years old. A 36-year-old girl had a stroke on the hill. The water went bad on the hill up above us. I live below Jesse Aiken. The water went bad up above on the hill. They neglected not to tell us. That's criminal neglect as far as I'm concerned. And the EPA came out to the house and said that if our water were a public water supply, they could do something. But since we were private water wells, they could do nothing. So I'd like to have a moment of silence for the pets, the people, and the sickly people in Ray, Pennsylvania, Avella, and Washington County, and Greene County that have passed away or are still battling and sick from the effects of fracking. You cannot tell me that there is no connection whenever I have done research after research after research, and all my research has come true and has proven true. I have been told that I am a liar. Are the dead people lying too? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Moten. Are we
Okay,
back
and
with
my name is
Ms.
Dana.
Dolly?
Only,
Yes.
like I said, I am registered to speak as well.
Yes. Please go ahead.
May I go?
Yes.
Okay. So like I said, my name is Dana Dolney. My group is Friends of the Harmed, and we provide direct aid to impacted families that have been negatively affected by oil and gas development in southwestern Pennsylvania. My organization has worked with about 50 families over the last few years in the southwest area. What we have seen is the consistency of the failure at the state and local level. Where I work, once I get called in once the DEP has failed. And once I show up, people usually say, well, we call them don't expect protection around here. So that's what the DEP is known as, first and foremost, what people should understand. Or in these impacted communities, they do not feel as though they're getting any help or assistance from the agency that is supposed to be protecting them, not facilitating the industry. Secondly, I'd like to point out that I have been personally, with my group, bringing water down to this community for drinking water. We have 6 homes that we're currently trying to bring drinking water to. We have 8 homes that we know of definitely that we would like to be bringing drinking water to, but we have potentially 12 impacted homes all below the park. Now, why this is important is because this park and these 2 wells, which Jeannie's well was, or Moten's well was SWPAGW07, and the Aikens well in the study was listed as SWPAGW09. I understand that there were results that were done on the Aiken well from 2011 and 2013. What I found interesting was that the EPA noted that there was a great difference between the tests that were done in 2011 and 2013. And during that time, subsequently, there were more wells that were being drilled in the park behind their home. Now, according to Shirley, who cannot be here today, I want to read a couple quick statements from her on her behalf. She said in 2008 she got sick. The whole town seemed to get sick. The water went bad. There was a constant solid line of trucks to the park, and then the fish died in the lake. She noticed around that time that there was a rash on her skin from bathing in the water. Others in the neighborhood started to notice these rashes and sores as well. They stopped drinking it in 2008, but they continued to bathe in it. That was until October of 2014 when Shirley landed in the hospital. She had to have open heart surgery where they found a lime-sized tumor inside of her heart. The doctor had never seen anything like this before. She wasn't home from the hospital, or she wasn't at home from 10/6/14 until 11/27/14, at which time she noticed that the rash that she had had for years had finally cleared up. Therefore, the water buffalo was finally installed by her son here at the house so that she could bathe in non-contaminated water because they were afraid of any infection after the open heart surgery. The EPA, she said, told us not to drink the water in 2011, that it had lead in it, but no one warned them not to bathe in it. The DEP has subsequently returned to the house as of December 2015 and has been testing monthly, but still we have no answers, just questions. After asking to see papers as to what was in the water, they received them, but they don't understand what they mean. They don't even know why they keep coming out to test or if there is something wrong. Why wasn't it taken care of by the EPA? They tell us not to drink the water, but the DEP keeps testing it. 9 years, she says, of poor air and water is far too much. Our health cannot improve without some help. My husband has breathing problems. We both have had leg problems. Apologize, one more page. There are oil trains going by day and night, and the house vibrates and alarms go off. I don't know for sure if they cause all of our health problems, but I do know without good water and good air, we cannot get better. All the testing that the EPA and DEP are doing after the years, they know what must be wrong. Please help us and please do something. So that was a statement from Shirley. Now, I would just like to make one more statement.
4.5 minutes, Ms. Donley, if you could wrap up, that would be great.
Okay. I just want to state for the record that if there was not an issue here, we would not have to be returning year after year, week after week, trying to provide people with water. What sickens me is that I know in this community that there are still many families that are bathing in this contaminated water, some with children. We do not have the means. We exist solely on donations. We've been able to put out about $20,000+ in donations to this kind of direct aid for independent air and water testing, water buffaloes and replacement water and medical grade air scrubbers. But that is barely enough to cover just one community. It should not fall on the shoulders. It should not be my burden or my organization's burden to have to make sure that people aren't being poisoned in their own homes. I'm sorry to be emotional, but we devote our lives to this. So we would like to very much see the EPA, whose mission it is to protect their health and safety, to do the same. Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Donley, and also to Jesse Eakin and Jeannie Moten for your comments. So I'd like to just ask now again if anybody on the Science Advisory Board has any follow-up questions or clarifications they'd like to ask from our last 10 speakers. Okay, I'm not hearing any. Okay. So why don't we then take this opportunity for a short, as Tom called it, bio break? Okay. The next on the list is Virginia Kirby. Can you identify yourself?
Hi, I'm here.
Okay.
Virginia Kirby.
Great. Please go ahead and provide your comments to the Science Advisory Board.
Okay, my name's Virginia Kirby. I live in the Northern Virginia, Washington, D.C. metro area. I thank the EPA Advisory Board for this opportunity to share in this public forum. As an American who believes our country is better off producing the energy we consume here at home, instead of importing it from foreign nations, I urge the Scientific Advisory Board to reaffirm the key findings from the EPA report released last summer that found hydraulic fracturing poses no significant threat to groundwater. Fracking has become a dirty word, but this is not grounded in facts, as much of the research you are reviewing has shown. In fact, hydraulic fracturing has afforded our country the opportunity to extricate ourselves from the volatile conflicts in the Middle East, since we no longer have to rely on another country to provide us so much of our energy. The more that we're able to rely on hydraulic fracturing to sustain our energy independence, the better off our country will be. This is true for our economy, but this is also for our environment. This is true. In fact, the abundance of locally obtainable, low-cost natural gas has provided a net benefit to our environment by supplanting coal as our primary fuel for electricity generation. What is undeniable are the revolutionary advances in technology in recent years that have greatly improved fracking practices. Fracking has been used successfully for more than 50 years for more than 1 million production wells. Please keep in mind that some anecdotal examples of problems associated with fracking includes practices not commonly in use today. Yes, the extraction by fracking can always improve, but we have reached the point where the practices are clearly safe with regard to surrounding groundwater contamination. As you continue the important work of the committee on this topic, please be guided by facts, science, and evidence, and not by emotional appeals and anecdotes. With that in mind, I hope you will affirm the conclusion people need to hear, that fracking is a safer practice. Thank you for your time and attention today.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Kirby, for your comments. Fred Baldessari?
Peter, Mr. Baldessari
Hello?
said he had a change.
Oh, are you on?
Hi, this is Fred Baldessari. I am here. I was able to make it. Unfortunately, I apologize if there's background noise. I'm at an airport, and so I had an opportunity to call in, and I'm available to speak if it's my turn.
It is, and the noise level is not bad at all, so please go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. I hear it in the background. So I want to thank everybody for the opportunity to speak regarding the draft SAB review of EPA's draft assessment. And I want to say that I agree with EPA's overall assessment that they did not find evidence that these mechanisms have led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources, in their view. I also agree with the SAB's review statement that hydraulic fracturing industry is rapidly evolving with changes in their processes being employed, and the assessment necessarily was developed with the data available at that point in time. I really think that the significance of that SAB statement cannot be downplayed. I have been a researcher and published in peer-reviewed journals on the application of isotope geochemistry since 1997. And in my career, I've been involved investigating well over 200 alleged incidents of stray gas migration. Certainly when we talk about gas migration, one of the more famous ones, or infamous, I guess is a better way to put it, is the Dimick incident, which was in fact, in my view, I reviewed all the data very early on in that incident in 2009. In my view, that was clearly an impact related to gas well drilling activity. However, because of the Dimick incidents, what has happened since then is that operators have adopted much more sound management practices, which include things like 3-string well design over 2-string design, improved drilling techniques through the aquifer system where previously they drilled on air at very high rates, and now that has been backed off and oftentimes drilled on water. Mechanical well integrity testing, ongoing monitoring of pressure, and all of these things have led to a reduction in the number of incidents that have occurred. There are incidents that still occur, and in my experience, in terms of subsurface impacts, what we see in the Dimick incident was clearly a methane migration incident. Now, the manifestation of it was pretty severe, and it resulted in the mobilization of naturally occurring compounds like iron and manganese, and sodium and other compounds, and maybe in some cases caused a redox condition in the groundwater. So there was some impacts, clearly, but once the methane is mitigated and the system is restored naturally, once methane is no longer dosing the system, it goes back to its natural condition pretty rapidly by natural processes. Now, the disturbances can go on for years if the water quality has been impacted as a result of the introduction of methane. But I think it's very important for the SAB for their statement that at the time we're at the very beginning of this industry, and what I have seen, and I've worked for industry as well as individuals in my consulting, and what I have seen is not only better regulations that are coming online, but also the operators are employing much better management practices and much more effective techniques. They've learned from what was done in the past. And, one of the things, if we think about it, even though 2009 was not that long ago when Dimick occurred, that was before they even drilled horizontal wells in the Appalachian Basin. That was the wells associated with the Dimick incident were vertical shale wells, which is unheard of anymore. Nobody does that for production reasons. So from the environmental side, what I see is much, much more improved processes, much more care, and much less impact to the aquifer system, especially as it relates to subsurface activities. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak.
Okay, thank you for your comments, and no problem with airport noise, so thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, bye-bye. So next we'd like to call upon two people whom we think may not be available, but I'll call their names anyway. Nancy Almasi or Timothy Hannigan are either on the line. Okay, we'll move on. Jenny, is it Lysak or Lysak?
That's good. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you. Is it Lysak?
It's Lysak, like there's
Lysak.
another S there.
Oh, okay. Please go ahead.
Okay. I'm speaking only from my Pennsylvania vantage point, but you don't usually find what you're not looking for. Our Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection openly admits to being severely understaffed. Pennsylvania's Auditor General Eugene DePascal, after an audit of the agency, found the agency went too easy on the oil and gas industry, lacked the resources it needs to do its job. He stated, quote, "It's underfunded, understaffed, does not have the infrastructure in place to meet continuing demands placed upon the agency by expanded shale gas development," end quote. The 14-month-long investigation ending in 2014 concluded DEP's documentation was and continues to be egregiously poor. The growth of the industry outpaced DEP's ability to oversee and protect water quality. Some PA wells have not been inspected at all, some infrequently, and consider the investigative team, the Public Herald, in doing Feil reviews of 17 of the 30 fracked counties in Pennsylvania, found that Pennsylvania DEP had cooked the books on thousands of water quality complaints related to oil and gas operations in PA, and that the DEP, through various means, either hid or took documents off the record. Those complaints are not in the records that the EPA looked at. There have been numerous violations for discharge of pollutional or industrial waste into the waters of the Commonwealth from an understaffed agency. 150 for just 3 of the 30 frac counties in just a few of the 11 years, which thick water hydrofracking of long laterals have taken place in PA. My own water was contaminated after the first Marcellus well was drilled in my township. Despite the fact that there was no other activity for miles around, and the fact that nothing has affected this water before in the 30 years that we've lived here, DEP complained the gas well was not the cause, but refused to share their research and was unable to offer up any explanation. Just in my neighborhood, because of the watchful eye of residents, 2 companies were caught disposing of their hazardous waste. One of those companies was illegally spreading produced water on our dirt roads in voluminous amounts, not only in our township but in several others. Another company was trucking it into a reclaimed strip mine. Several of our Pennsylvania waterways have had to be remediated because of excessive radioactivity. Hundreds of disposal sites for wastewater could be affected but haven't been checked because more than 1.3 billion gallons of wastewater was sent to Pennsylvania treatment plants not equipped to remove many of the toxic radioactivity elements. A produced water facility in PA has had violations for leaking tanks, leaking impoundments, and leachate out of its bounds. Who is checking the water that has been impacted by spills, violations, and who's checking for radioactivity? There is a preponderance of the evidence for widespread water contamination or direct threat of contamination due to fracking, no matter how cleverly or criminally it's hidden. This non-technological evidence is pertinent to the conclusion. Much of it may not be found in the scientific literature and government data, but it must not be dismissed. It's no longer a matter of potential impacts, but more the ongoing impacts to drinking water resources from hydraulic fracturing. I'm doubtful that the EPA's initial method of assessing impacts was comprehensive when it appears to be mainly relying on state governmental agencies that are understaffed, underfunded, and audited and found inferior and often influenced heavily by industry and special interests. So if that is what the Science Advisory Board means in recommending that the EPA discuss the significant data limitations and uncertainties when presenting the major findings, I agree. It should be clear and stress that there are too many risks to our water resources for the process to continue at all. The environmental costs far outweigh the benefits. No harm should be permitted, and any one case of water contamination is one too many. The EPA should disallow the continued rape of our resources at the expense of its true treasures, clean water, and air and healthy citizens, especially in the light that we are now forced to contemplate the unthinkable, the apocalyptic fate of the planet from the continued use, extraction, promotion of natural gas and other fossil fuels, obliterating our hopes of any of us anywhere having a future on a habitable planet. You are one of the agencies that we're the mercy of. I feel it must be hard to take a look at the real cost when you're bound by certain agency parameters and guidelines discussed in offices that are so many light years away from actually having to live and feel threatened by a toxic industry at your doorstep. So please help us. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Lysek, for your comments. Next, I'd like to call upon Yvonne Watson. Are you on the line, please?
I'm here.
Okay, please go ahead. Yes, I can hear you. Please go ahead, Ms. Watson.
Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah.
In order to assess the potential threat posed by hydraulic fracturing on drinking water sources, it is critical that the EPA conduct its own independent testing, assessments, field studies, and other research. In this regard, I agree with SAB's concerns and recommendations to the EPA. I also agree with the board's concerns about drawing national-level conclusions based on the evidence so far presented. As a resident of California, I know with absolute certainty that the effects of even a relatively small amount of hydraulic fracturing occurring in my state remain unknown and may never be known. This is because, until very recently, hydraulic fracturing in California was regulated but not reported. On March 8, 2012, I attended a public meeting hosted by the California Department of Conservation. The purpose of the meeting was to address public concerns about hydraulic fracturing in the Inglewood oil field, considered to be the largest urban oil field in the country. Try to imagine our astonishment when Mr. Jason Marshall, the Chief Deputy Director of the California Department of Conservation, said, "There is no law that says before you do a frac job, you have to tell DOGGR." DOGGR, the Division of Oil, Gas, and Geothermal Resources, is the state agency responsible for regulating oil and gas well activities in California. When a state with some of the toughest environmental protection laws in the country has allowed operators to conduct well stimulation activities without even filing a notification, one can only imagine what has been taking place in states with less stringent requirements. In a PowerPoint presentation entitled Fracking in California, David Albright, an associate director with the U.S. EPA Region 9, wrote, "The extent to which horizontal drilling with hydraulic fracturing is occurring in California is not well understood because there are currently no requirements to report these activities. Fortunately, for those of us who live in Southern California, the first attempt at public disclosure of such activities came from an unlikely source, the South Coast Air Quality Management District, SCAQMD. On April 5, 2013, the SCAQMD adopted Rule 1148.2, Notification and Reporting Requirements for Oil and Gas Well and Chemical Suppliers. This rule includes a searchable database available on the AQMD's website where the public can access information on when and where various well stimulation activities are taking place and what types of chemicals are being used. I've had the honor of being a part of the AQMD's working group for Rule 1148.2. On November 12, 2014, we were given an update on the findings and implementations of this rule. Of particular concern to the working group was the finding that approximately 50% of these activities were occurring at a distance of 1,500 feet or less from sensitive receptors. AQMD well inspection observers also noted they saw visible smoke at 13 inspections, visible dust at 13 inspections, and noticeable odors at 10 inspections. Although this rule is designed to address air quality issues, its findings suggest the possibility of airborne contamination of drinking water sources, a pathway not specifically addressed in the EPA's hydraulic fracturing water cycle. Our smoke, along with particulate matter and dust, covered under spills and releases if it's observed during the chemical mixing stage of the HFWC. Even odors themselves can be symptomatic of a serious problem depending on the type of chemical that's causing the odor. One of the many lessons learned from the massive Aliso Canyon gas leak is that contaminants can become aerosolized, travel long distances through the atmosphere, and be redeposited miles away from the wellhead. It is possible that such contaminants may end up in drinking water sources open to the air, such as rivers or lakes, or be washed into such sources via stormwater runoff. Residue containing heavy metals, barium, vanadium, manganese, lead, strontium, and aluminum was found inside residences near the gas leak. The homes required professional cleanup by trained personnel following Los Angeles County Health Department protocol. That's my conclusion on my comments. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Watson, for your comments. I appreciate it. Next, I'd like to ask if Tara Mikesell is on. I'm sorry if I'm saying that wrong.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah, can you say your last name?
Hello?
Okay.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yes, please go ahead.
Okay. Bear with me because I work a graveyard shift and I stayed up all day to do this. I want to thank the panel for this opportunity to speak. My name is Tara Mikesell, live in Garfield County, Colorado. The best way to objectively challenge fracking is to address the issue of how frac fluids
are disposed of in Class 2 injection wells or evaporation pits. The industry claims that they recycle. In fact, they dilute the flowback fluid and reuse it. At some point, it is too contaminated to reuse. What is done with it then? It is now certain that injecting waste into Class 2 injection wells causes earthquakes. In addition, who other than the taxpayers will monitor and repair the wells decades from now? One solution is bona fide recycling of flowback fluids with minimal waste streams that can be safely disposed of. In Garfield County, Colorado, at the height of the boom, regulations and oversight were non-existent and biased. We were bought out to the extreme. I watched my neighbors suffer through heinous health impacts and exposures to toxic fumes from evap pits, frack waste, and wellhead emissions, with little to no adequate up-to-date remediation or attention to their plate. And by the way, the local media is totally bought out. So is the government. Money rolled into the county, but lives were destroyed and people suffered hugely. My 500-page book, Collateral Damage, written at the request of my now deceased friend Chris Mabaldi, records these events. Also, the Emmy Award-winning film Split Estate and Gaslands delve into this complex and devastating issue. But listen, dudes, this company, this industry, they steamroller through these country towns, and you have no idea what they leave in their wake. I do, I know. And I have pages and pages of things I could tell you, but I have friends who are dying, friends whose lives have been destroyed. Look into why the EPA did not look into Divide Creek Seep or the Amos well blow up the day they fracked. Weston Wilson called the whistleblower action. He worked for the EPA during the Halliburton loophole deal. We know what's going on. Look, help us.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. I appreciate it. Next, I'd like to hear from Bryce
You understand,
Payne.
It's also true.
Okay.
These people are really being really screwed over here, and we really want the EPA to look into it. And the industry has a lot of money, and we have none.
Okay, well, we appreciate your comments very much, Ms. Mikesell. Next, let's see if Bryce Payne is on the line, and if we can hear from Bryce Payne.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can hear you, Mr. Payne. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes, please, go ahead.
Okay. Hi, my name is Dr. Bryce Payne. I'm the Director of Science and Technology for Gas Safety, Inc., an affiliated consultant with Collaborative Laboratories for Environmental Analysis and Remediation at the University of Texas at Arlington, and a senior fellow with the Center for Environment, Energy, and Sustainability at Wake Forest University. I want to commend the panel and board for your work efforts in this review, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I read quickly through the most recent draft of the review, searching for points of concern in previous drafts to see how they had or had not been handled. During that reading, I developed a vague but definitive impression that the draft review is in many senses self-contradictory. In numerous places, there are cautions regarding lack of evidence of contamination having ever occurred or having occurred frequently. Then there are apologetic-sounding sections offering more cautions that the EPA should point out to the public that well cementing and other technologies have been improving. That is, on the one hand, there are no or only limited problems, which seem to raise the interesting question that if that is true, why are improved cementing technologies needed at all? There are numerous such mentions and concerns about lack of data and countering apologetics that say basically, well, even if there were some problems, technology is improving to resolve and reduce occurrences of any such problems in the future. This leaves one with the uneasy feeling that we neither know with confidence whether there are problems, and hence whether or not the technology being developed and proffered are even relevant. There is a certain sense of science, engineering, schizophrenia, which seems to suggest that there must be a fundamental misunderstanding of phenomena of concern or application of inappropriate references or paradigm. Then it occurred to me that such is indeed the case, and the nature of the fundamental reasoning error is reasonably easily perceived. And a convenient starting point is the definition of proximity that appears on lines 29 to 38 on page 3 of the review. I will just briefly summarize that here and say that the Research Advisory Panel found that there is apparently, at present, no functionally reliable basis for selecting any particular distance, vertical or horizontal, as proximate to a hydraulically fractured well with respect to drinking water resources. Why might that be the case? An answer becomes surprisingly quickly apparent if one considers industry data on out-of-zone hydraulic fracturing, which are discussed at length in my written comments. Summarizing those findings, continuity of fracture systems comprised of hydraulic fractures and contacted natural fractures often extend to distances of kilometers from the horizontal bore of hydraulically fractured wells. This quickly leads to an interesting need to consider whether unconventional horizontal hydraulically fractured wells might actually be fundamentally different from conventional vertical wells, fracked or not. In conventional vertical wells, containment, well integrity, and maintenance of control are relatively straightforward considerations, relatively well understood in practice. Loss of control of conventional wells is a major operational concern, with generally well-developed response practices that are urgently and diligently applied when loss of control occurs, and generally loss of control is readily apparent. It can be reasonably argued that such concerns and corrective measures apply to the vertical portions of unconventional hydraulic fractured wells. In these vertical bore situations, the recurring occurrence of impermeable strata along the height of the bore are key to maintaining or restoring integrity of the well. The horizontal portion of these unconventional wells, however, presents a confounded situation. Hydraulic fracturing of a horizontal well has a specific purpose of fracturing a target production formation that, if encountered in a conventional vertical well, would be regarded as an impermeable formation and integral to the well's control. The integrity of a hydraulically fractured horizontal well is utterly dependent on the avoidance of any propagation of hydraulic fractures beyond or into natural fractures that extend beyond the target production zone. Restating, hydraulic fracturing of horizontal wells amounts to intentionally violating the structural integrity of a gas oil-bearing formation to extract that gas and oil, with no means for designing, constructing, or restoring well control beyond the target zone should fracture propagation extend beyond. The industry data on out-of-zone fracking clearly shows that out-of-zone fracturing is common, not rare. I strongly recommend that the board and EPA consider the industry findings that continuity of hydraulic fracturing systems to distances of kilometers beyond the horizontal bore necessarily implies that conventional concepts of well integrity should not be applied to horizontal fracturing hydraulically fractured wells. Much more scrutiny, data, and analysis is needed to understand these wells and their implications for water resources. But the available industry data on out-of-zone hydraulic fracturing clearly suggests contamination of water resources is more likely than not, appearing to present a question of when, not if, such contamination is likely to occur. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Payne, for your comments. And with that, we'll then ask if Natalie Mebane or Mebane is on the line.
Yes, this is Natalie Mebane. Hello.
Please go ahead.
Hi.
I can hear you.
Thank you. So, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to offer comment today. My name is Natalie Mebane, and I am the Associate Washington Representative for the National Sierra Club's Beyond Dirty Fuels campaign, working to end our country's reliance on oil and gas and to protect communities from the harms these fuels impose, as well as to combat catastrophic climate change. And so on behalf of Sierra Club's 2.4 million members and supporters around the country, I'd like again to thank the Science Advisory Board for conducting this thorough review of the EPA's assessment of the potential impacts of hydraulic fracturing for oil and gas on drinking water resources. With millions of Americans around the country now living amongst oil and gas infrastructure, it is critical that we get this assessment right and that we work quickly to correct the harms that this industry has inflicted on these communities. Thousands of community members are watching this process, and community members are painfully familiar with the very real impacts that the oil and gas industry has had on their families. People whose water has been entirely shut off due to the dangerous methane contamination, requiring construction of off-gassing stacks next to their homes. These are people who have been forced to fill jugs of water at their local supermarkets because the companies have refused to fill their water buffaloes. People paying to truck in water themselves because the water coming out of their taps gives their children nosebleeds, rashes, and headaches. And so we're very glad to see your draft recommendations to the EPA and how they can improve the study. As you recognize, many members of the general public may only read the executive summary, and many have done so to great alarm, as the apparent findings represented in the executive summary do not comport with the realities they're living with on the ground. In particular, I would like to thank you for the following section. The SAB has concerns regarding the clarity and adequacy of support for several major findings presented within the draft assessment report that seek to draw national-level conclusions. The SAB is concerned that these major findings do not clearly, concisely, and accurately describe the findings developed in the chapters of the draft assessment report, and that the EPA has not adequately supported these major findings with data or analysis from within the body of the draft assessment report. The SAB is concerned that these major findings are presented ambiguously within the executive summary and appear inconsistent with the observations, data, and levels of uncertainty presented and discussed in the body of the draft assessment report. Most SAB panel members expressed particular concern regarding the draft assessment report's high-level conclusion statement that we did not find evidence that these mechanisms have led to widespread systemic impacts on drinking water resources within the United States. Given these concerns, we hope that you will clearly recommend that the sentence citing no widespread systemic impacts be removed or dramatically changed in the executive summary. As per your report, it does not accurately describe the EPA's own findings and has absolutely been interpreted by the public as the primary finding of the study. Sorry, if everybody could please mute as well. Thank you. To see from your report that this is an inaccurate reflection of the EPA's own study is infuriating, and this must be rectified. We also appreciate your additional suggestions for improving the executive summary to make it more amenable to a broad audience specifically. We appreciate the recognition of the severity of local-level fracking impacts, the assertion that the EPA should be cautious about their use of generalizations and clearly qualify them if they are employed, and that the EPA should either include before and after studies, or at the very least explain why they aren't included or reference such studies conducted by other bodies. Now, for me, I have personally seen the orange water that comes out of the spigot from homeowners that have had their drinking water contaminated by oil and gas drilling. I've seen their off-gassing stacks that continuously vent methane outside of someone's home because their tap water is filled with it. I've spoken to the children that were sick for months at a time, experiencing extreme stomach pains, nosebleeds, and vomiting. It is not enough for EPA to say that these impacts are not widespread when these families no longer have safe water to use. In fact, it is important that the EPA study clearly recognizes the impacts on drinking water that have taken place as a result of fracking, and that the arbitrary summary statements referencing those impacts not being widespread or systemic be removed. Again, thank you for conducting this important review, and we look forward to your final review.
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Ms. Mebane. So that is the conclusion of the list we had.
Thank you, Dr. Thorne. I'd like to thank all the public commenters for participating today. I would also encourage you, if you haven't sent a written statement, it's a valuable record and a source that the members can go back to as they deliberate about the quality review and to document your comments today.